What's going on, guys? It's Rich here from the Millibit Tutorials, and today we are going to be going over Flask for web development. So if you don't know already, Flask is basically a way for you to create a website using Python. Flask itself is a web framework. I'll link this documentation below. It's very detailed. But in this tutorial, it's another no-BS tutorial, which again, that just means we're not going to be coding each line by line. Instead, we're going to be looking over a completed project using Flask, and I'll just explain to you what each thing does. Then you can click the link in the description to get all of the code, all of the notes, all of the resources for free in the link in the description. So before we even start this tutorial, I'd also like to point out I have a corresponding blog post on the millibit.com related to how you can create a Flask app. So this will also be in the link in the description. The purpose of this video is to just give you an idea of what Flask is and how you can use it, and basically show you through a finished project and try to give you the gist of what's going on. Without further ado, let's just jump straight into it, the no BS Flask tutorial. Start off, open up PyCharm. Let me show you the way this app works, a brief summary, and then I'll show you the way it's organized. So a summary. The way Flask works, you literally need to just import Flask at the top of your Python file. You can do whatever you need to do in the back end of your website using your Python file. And Flask contains its own web server, meaning once you run your Flask app, it automatically sets up a web server on your own computer so that you can visit your website by typing in like localhost :5000. It's the same way we type in www.facebook.com and that sends us to Facebook servers. We can set up our own local web server using Flask by running the Flask app in our Python code, and it sets up a local web server for us to basically test our website. That's a brief overview. Let's go over how the actual project is organized and then what the code does line by line. So let's start with how the project's organized. Take a look at this left-hand panel where my mouse is. Basically, there's just a folder, and I called it reference Flask project. You can call it whatever you want. This is where you're going to keep all of your files corresponding to this project. Within it, there are just two things. There's App.py, which is your main Python file, which I explained earlier. It's responsible for setting up a local web server and for having all of the functions and logic behind the website that actually makes the website work. And then we have another directory called templates. Okay, so templates contains your HTML page. If you're not familiar, HTML, again, it's used to actually display the page on the website. It contains, the attributes, the buttons, the forms, the actual stuff that the user sees, and then the things that the website does in the background, that happens in your app.py file. And then we will be talking about how we can link these two things together so that we can use Python to basically respond to something someone does when interacting with the HTML. So before we even get started, let me just show you what this HTML page looks like in real life. So not looking at the code, looking at visually what this page looks like. It looks like this. This is not the prettiest website, I know, but the point of this tutorial, again, is to quickly explain how you can do different things like interact with the UI and connect it to the backend very simply and set up the web server. So super simple website. All we have is two different rows. The first row contains a text that says value 1, and then a text field where you can type something in, and then a button. Second row contains another text field, and then a button. Okay, the reason why I have two text fields and buttons is because the first one we're going to handle using post requests. I'm going to explain to you what that is and how you can deal with that. And the second one we're going to use Ajax to actually separate our back end and our front end. So if that sounds confusing, don't worry about it. We're going to get in depth just in a second. So this is our HTML page. This is the website we're going to create. And again, this is not my website. This is just a reference to my HTML page right here. I'm not actually running any web servers, not running a website right now. And then in the future, I'll also have a tutorial about how you can upload your Flask app to something called Heroku, which I'll link that in the description as well. Heroku is a way for you to basically get your website running on someone else's servers so that you can visit it from any device. It doesn't have to be your own device running your own local web server. That's more complicated. That we'll get into in the future. So let's go back to PyCharm and try to understand what's going on. So again, this is the HTML page that corresponds to this file, which I just showed you. And now let's look at the Python. So before we get started, you're going to have to import Flask. If you haven't already installed Flask, you have to use pip to install it. The example of how you do that will be in the description below. I'm not going to go over the steps, but you just do pip install Flask. It's very simple. Then you can import it in your Python file, and then we do app equals Flask name, right? So this is basically saying that this file, this app.py file, will contain the main Flask app. This is the file that we're using to run basically our web server and to create our website. Then we have a couple of functions. I'll go over the functions in the future. And then the file goes to this if name equals main, which basically says if we are in this file, we're going to run our app. So app.run creates your web server locally and runs your website. So if I clicked run, notice how it says running on 127.0.0.1 :5000. That means that if I visit this link, if I copy it and I paste it, it goes to my website because it is running locally in this area. It's the same thing as doing http://google.com, except now it's running locally. So this is just basically an address to go locally to the web server. It creates that web server after doing app.run. So now let me explain to you how we can actually have logic in our app. We can do something called an app route. So, you know, in Python, you have functions and you can return values. In a Flask Python app, you have the same functions, but each function can correspond to a different route in your app. So for example, if you have www.google.com/hello versus /first versus /second, all of those different variations of what comes after the slash are different app routes. So in this case, if we navigate to whatever this link is, which is basically 127.0.0.1:5000 slash, it takes us to the main page because we're doing return render template, which basically renders an HTML page, and we're returning mypage.html. Does that make sense? We are returning the HTML page when you go to the slash app route. Think of slash as just with nothing, right? You're not putting anything next to it. Then we have another app route slash. This means that this function will be invoked if we go to 127 point blah 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 slash. Again, that's what it means. Then we have post method. But the difference between these two is that this one just contained app.route. This contains app.route, and it says methods equals post. So we'll get into this a little bit later, but it means if we receive a post method, which if you don't understand what that is right now, don't worry about it. Basically, it's something we're sending to our website from something else. If we receive a post method and we're on the slash, then we're going to run the post method function. That's all there is to it. And then the last one, I'll explain to you in a bit. This one gets a little bit more complicated. So now that we understand what's going on, you can probably tell the reason why this HTML page displays when you type up 127.0.0.1 is because we're rendering our HTML page and we're returning that. Okay, so now let's look at the HTML page. Before we even look at this, I want to just point out a really easy hack. If you don't know how to code in HTML, you can search up HTML editor and you can just find one online. There's a bunch, and then anything that you type up on the left will transfer into code on the right. And so you know, if I bold text and I type in hi, then it comes up as strong in the code. And then you can just copy and paste your HTML from here into your code if you want to change your HTML. For this example, all the code's in the description anyway, so there's no point of you doing that. But I just wanted to point that out. Anyways, let's look at our HTML. So let's ignore all of this stuff for now. Okay, we're going to start off simple. We have a title that says I love the millibit up here, and then we have a form. A form is basically just a way for the user to interact with the website. So we have an input type that says value1, and the type is text, which is why we have something that says value1. It's literally just a text that says value1. Then we have input type submit. Okay, so submit, this is a button. We have a submit button here. So when you click the submit button, it's going to do something because that's what buttons do. And the method is post. So remember we were talking about post methods earlier. Basically, if you set up a form and you say form method equals post, that means whenever you click the submit button, it will send a post method to your website. So let's say I click submit. Let's say I click submit. In my Python app, which again, this is the brains of the website. This is what's going on in the background. In my Python app, it will go to my app route. It's just slash because I'm still on 127.0.0.1:5000 slash. And then it will send a post method. So any functions that I set up with an app route that say methods equals post and the route is a slash, it will invoke those methods. So it will invoke my post method. Well, what does post method do? Well, let's see. Post method says string received equals request dot form. Okay, so you're probably like, what the heck is request? Well, request is one of these things we imported earlier. It's basically a way for you to get a value from a post request. So we clicked post in our form, we clicked the submit button in our form, and we also had a way for you to enter a value in that same form, right? This little text box, you could enter a value in it. So now if we want to get the value of what the user typed in our post method, which gets invoked when you click the button, we just do request.form and then the name of what we want to get, value1. Again, value1 is what this was defined as. This text box is value1. So whatever I type in here, if I do request.form value1, I will get this text. Okay, and then what we do is we type in return. Again, what return does, return basically displays a page of whatever you're returning. So in the past, we did return an HTML page, so we were returning this HTML page, but now we're just going to return text. Then we do return string received, and if you're not familiar with dot format, it basically puts whatever you put in the dot format in the curly brace. We do string received, and then we print what the user put. So let me do that. Technically, if I type something in here, let's type in the millibit is awesome, and I click submit, it says string received, the millibit is awesome. Does that make sense? We're basically returning whatever the user typed into here, and we're getting that value through a post request from our HTML into our Python.